On the morning of July 22, 2003, 200 American soldiers surrounded a villa in the Fala district of Mosul, and the men hiding inside already knew there would be no surrender. Uday Hussein had spent his whole life as the most feared man in Iraq, after his father and his younger brother Qusay had spent his quietly deciding who lived and who simply vanished. A loudspeaker called for them to come out. The answer was gunfire. The firefight lasted nearly 4 hours, until helicopters were firing rockets into the upper floor, and when the walls finally went quiet, the brothers who had ruled Iraqi sport, Iraqi media, and Iraqi nightmares were dead on the floor of a borrowed house. To understand how they got there, and why a $30 million bounty ended in that room, you have to go back to a father who raised two very different kinds of monster. Two sons, one father. Uday was born in 1964, the eldest, and almost from the start he understood that being Saddam's son meant the rules were something other people obeyed. Classmates remembered a boy who ordered his teachers around and had his bodyguards seize any car on the street nicer than his own, and his father indulged all of it, right up until the night it spilled blood. In October 1988, at a party honoring Egypt's First Lady, a drunken Uday beat his father's personal valet to death in front of the assembled guests because the man had helped introduce a mistress to Saddam. Even Saddam was horrified. He jailed his son briefly, then exiled him to Switzerland, and the Swiss threw him out within 2 years for carrying a weapon. When Uday finally came home, he found the locks changed on his future. Power was quietly shifting to the younger brother, Qusay, the calm one, the one who never made scenes. The son Saddam would later describe as simply a good son, and the gap between them was real. By the early 2000s, Qusay ran the intelligence services, the elite Republican Guard, and the secret police, while Uday was left with sport, a newspaper, and a militia. Where Uday wanted to be seen, Qusay wanted to be trusted. That single difference would decide everything that followed. One brother made you look, the other made you disappear. The Stadium of Fear. When Saddam made Uday head of the Iraqi Olympic Committee, he handed his son something better than an army. He handed him a room full of people who could be punished for losing. On the upper floor of the Olympic headquarters in Baghdad, Uday kept a private prison, and athletes who disappointed him were dragged there to learn what failure cost. Footballers were whipped on the soles of their feet, beaten with electrical cables, then dragged across pavement until their backs bled and dunked in sewage so the wounds would turn septic. After Iraq lost 4-1 to Japan in 1997, Uday blamed 3 players by name, the goalkeeper Hashim Hassan among them, and had them whipped for 3 straight days, beaten where the marks wouldn't show. The volleyball star Issam Thamer Al-Diwan was shackled and bent into agony after a defeat, and another losing team was forced to kick a concrete ball until their own feet shattered. Weightlifter Raid Ahmed, Iraq's flag bearer at the 1996 Olympics, finally fled the country and said out loud what everyone in Iraqi sport already knew. A FIFA inquiry that same year found nothing, because the players, watched by secret police, lied to investigators to survive. So the men kept their silence, and the building kept its secret, until American soldiers walked into those same cells in 2003. The athletes had learned to fear winning, because a final meant a podium, and a podium meant Uday was watching. The frontman. Locked out of the army by his own father, Uday went looking for a different kind of power, and he found it in the one thing a regime can never fully control: the story it tells about itself. By his early 30s, he ran a personal media empire, a dozen newspapers, the National Youth TV channel, an FM radio station, and the Journalists' Union itself, which obediently named him Journalist of the Century. His flagship paper, Babel, was the clever part. Uday let it print complaints about petty officials and broken bureaucracy, never about Saddam. So ordinary Iraqis felt heard while the cage stayed locked. He used the same paper to plant fake stories that ended the careers of rivals inside his father's circle, and in 1999 he purged hundreds of journalists in a single stroke for praising Saddam too thinly. To the street, he was the accessible one, the prince who let you complain. But the charm was a costume. His former press secretary, Abbas al-Janabi, who fled into exile after 15 years and 9 separate arrests on Uday's orders, described being made to watch as Uday's men beat a man inside a nail-studded box, according to that exile testimony, simply to see how much blood would come out. The mask never matched the face beneath it. While Uday performed for the cameras, Qusay never needed them. He ran the machinery that made people disappear, and almost no one ever saw his face at all. The Hooded Army. In 1994, still smarting that Qusay commanded real soldiers while he ran a newspaper, Uday raised an army of his own and called it the Fedayeen Saddam, Saddam's men of sacrifice. It began as 10,000 recruits pulled from the poorest corners of Iraq and swelled toward 40,000, dressed in black, often masked, answerable to no general and no court. They shot deserters where they stood, and they carried out the killings the regular state preferred not to sign its name to. Beginning in 2000, under the banner of an anti-prostitution campaign, the Fedayeen beheaded more than 200 women across Baghdad. And according to U.S. State Department reporting, many of them were not sex workers at all, but educated, outspoken women the regime wanted gone. Some of the severed heads were left on the family's own doorsteps. But the Fedayeen's killings were only the public half of it. Human rights investigators later documented how Uday's own men abducted women and girls off the streets and out of wedding parties for him, with no police and no judge willing to take a complaint against Saddam's son. As for the men holding the swords, they were barely men at all. The recruits were grown from children, boys as young as 10 run through indoctrination camps called Saddam's Cubs, taught blind loyalty and numb to violence, then folded into the ranks the moment they turned 16. Uday boasted that he now held the foundations of a state. Saddam heard that and grew uneasy. Uday had wanted to prove he could raise an army. What he had actually built was a machine for turning boys into executioners. Legend and ledger. By now, the stories about Uday had grown teeth of their own, and some of them weren't true, which matters because the lies have always made it easier to look away from the facts. Before the war, a British MP told the world that Saddam's regime fed live prisoners into an industrial shredder, and the image circled the planet. But no shredder was ever found, and she later admitted the account came from a single unverified source. The rumor that Uday fed people to the lions in his private zoo is the same kind of story. He once threatened to throw losing footballers to ravenous dogs, yet when American troops inherited his menagerie in 2003, they found hungry animals and no human remains. There was even a man, Latif Yahia, who claimed to have been surgically remade into Uday's body double, a story plausible enough that the regime did use decoys, and embellished enough that insiders dispute the rest. We separate these out not to soften the man but to sharpen him, because the verified ledger needs no embellishment. Uday really did torture those athletes, really did abduct and rape, really did order those killings, all of it documented by the survivors who lived to name him. As one Iraqi who suffered under him put it, the reality was bad enough that no one needed to invent anything. Even Saddam, asked about his son years later, called him impulsive and unfit to lead, which is why the quiet brother held the real keys all along. The night the wolf fell. On the night of December 12, 1996, the hunter became the prey. Uday was driving his red Porsche through the upscale Mansour district of Baghdad when gunmen with Kalashnikovs opened up on the car, and by the time the shooting stopped, at least 8 bullets were in him, one lodged against his spine, where surgeons judged it too dangerous to remove. He lived, but the man who had built his power on physical menace would walk the rest of his life with a cane, dragging a ruined leg behind him. No one was ever convincingly caught. An opposition cell called The Awakening claimed it, and quieter voices wondered whether someone inside the family had simply let the bullets through, though no hard evidence ever surfaced. And while Uday lay recovering, his father made a quiet decision that mattered more than the bullets. He handed command of the Fedayeen to Qusay, who stripped out Uday's loyalists and replaced them with Saddam's own. By the time Uday healed, the army he had built answered to his brother. What the ambush did to him was worse than the wound. Associates say his cruelty only deepened afterward, his rage at ordinary Iraqis sharpening, and the worst of the athlete torture stories date from these crippled years. A wounded wolf is still a wolf, and this one had just learned that he could bleed. So had everyone watching. If the untouchable prince could be reached on his own street, then maybe the regime that protected him was not invincible either. Mosul, closed. 7 years later, the country the brothers had terrorized came apart in a single spring, and the two men who never trusted the same bodyguards, who had spent a lifetime as rivals, ended up hiding in the same house. A relative named Nawaf al-Zaidan took them into his Mosul villa, and then, with a $30 million bounty on the table, he picked up the phone. When the soldiers came on July 22, 2003, the brothers chose the 4-hour firefight we opened on, fighting from the upper floor until helicopters tore the walls down around them. At the end of it, the regime's two faces were lying on the same floor. To prove the Playboy Prince was truly gone, the Americans showed the world an X-ray of his leg, the 8-inch steel rod the surgeons had bolted in after that night in Mansour. The wound that once told Iraqis their tormentor could bleed now told them he was dead. Uday left behind a little black book of women's names that no one would ever finish counting, and the more than 200 women his Fedayeen beheaded were never counted at all. A regime had needed both of them, the sun who made you look and the sun who made you disappear. Tyranny had spent 30 years insisting it could not be touched. It ended on a borrowed floor in Mosul, identified by the scar of the one night it was.